Operating in gas and oil production and exploration services, Pemex is a company that offers services such as petrochemical distribution, pipeline carriage, and the shipping centers and logistics to facilitate such commercialization. Pemex is state-owned and headquartered in Mexico City, Mexico. In addition to its domestic market, which is mostly gas stations servicing both gas and diesel engines, they also export petrochemical products, crude oil, and petroleum to the international markets. Pemex had 18.6 billion in revenue in 2022 and employs roughly 120,000 employees. As one of the largest petro companies in the world, Pemex is a major source of revenue for the Mexican federal government and contribute as much as 1/3 of their national budget. Created on March 18, 1938, Pemex was formed as a means to consolidate Mexico's oil industry, as decades of tensions between oil companies and the Mexican government led to the country's expropriation of the commodity. By the 1970s, Pemex had discovered huge oil reserves in the country through its exploration program and began to exploit these newly discovered reserves, such as those in the Mexican states of Chiapas and Tabasco, as well as offshore in the Bay of Campeche in the Gulf of Mexico. The contribution of Pemex to the Mexican federal government was much higher prior to the 21st century, as Pemex is now the most indebted oil company in the world and has been for the past several years. In fact, just this year, the head of Pemex, Octavio Romero, had to appear before Mexican lawmakers to explain why the company was unable to pay suppliers over 500 million owed, which led to credit rating firms to downgrade Pemex and for the Mexican government to lend even more financial support. Firms internationalized to exploit the capitalist market system of commodity production in the pursuit for profit. However, state-owned enterprises such as Pemex tend to have a weak performance in comparison to private enterprise, which can have macroeconomic implications. SOEs, which are known to be poorly managed, create unreliable service provisions, such as power shortages and higher input costs. Despite this, they are protected from competition and undermine their local economy as a whole, typically through the miscalculation of resources, which leads to aggregate production losses. Nevertheless, it is important for countries to engage in international trade to access a greater variety of services and goods and better utilize their own resources. Trade theory suggests that a country develop a comparative advantage and engage in free trade with trading partners such that each country produce a commodity where they have this advantage to gain from the trades. Mexico, of course, has hoped to benefit in this way from its petroleum company, Pemex. Because of this, Mexico has free trade agreements with many countries, such as the USMCA with the United States and Canada, and they are a member of the WTO, as well as the Asia Pacific Economic Cooperation, or APEC. In total, Mexico has 13 free trade agreements with 50 countries, covering most of the globe, from the European Union to Japan and 10 countries in Latin America. Because of the fact that trade has become an increasingly governed process and the fact that Mexico has state-owned enterprises such as Pemex, free trade agreements are very important for the country. They need for their firm to remain one of the important actors in the circulation of world trade and remain heavily involved in the selling of their goods, or else those countries that are importing their product might find replacement sources, such as how China has done with Russia, or by investing more heavily in green energy. Luckily, Mexico has the ability to influence such governances on local and national level, which can make it easier for Mexico to become engaged in free trade agreements. For instance, because Pemex is state-owned, Mexico might be more agreeable to the terms of trade agreements than countries that do not have any state-owned industries. Evidence of this might be found in the fact that Mexico has more free trade agreements than any other country. With many new oil and gas fields still being discovered today, and the many existing oil fields in the Gulf of Mexico, and oil fields in the coastal states such as those in Campeche, Tabasco, and Veracruz, Pemex is likely going to be able to keep a foothold in the world economy of oil products for years to come. While the oil exports are not today that of what they were in the 1980s, when oil and petroleum products accounted for 80% of the Mexican government revenue, they still account for a significant amount of revenue for the country. With the proper infrastructure in place and the appropriate improvements done to the existing facilities, Pemex could become even more powerful and even rival companies of the Middle East. But if the country and Pemex were to take things further and invest in green energy, as well as make use of better technology for the extraction and production of refined oil products, they can guarantee their place among the world's top exporters of not just oil products, but also renewable energy. Because of this sector alone, Mexico has and is likely to remain agreeable and flexible when it comes to world trade. That is not to mention that the fact that Mexico is also a major exporter in such goods as chemicals, metals, textiles, and machinery, all of which are considerations that have led Mexico to undergo major changes in relation to the free market economy and world trade, and work hard to maintain their 11 free trade agreements, which cover 43 countries.